Good afternoon, 11th grade history class, and welcome back to our second lesson of our online lesson webinars that we're going to be posting over the next couple weeks. Today we're just going to be going over our continuation of chapter 23. We're going to go over two sections today, section 5 and section 6 of chapter 23, and continue our discussion of the progressive presidents. If you remember yesterday, we talked a little bit about Teddy Roosevelt, but mostly we spent our time talking about William Howard Taft. Today we're going to talk about the president that followed him. His name is Thomas Woodrow Wilson. We're going to talk about the administration of Thomas Woodrow Wilson, and we're also going to talk about some of his domestic and foreign policies as well. Now, before I get started, I just want to remind you all that you should be keeping up with your work every single day, and this also includes any kind of work that I've given to you on last Friday. I have received some of you guys' work that you guys have sent in with your parents, and I do appreciate that. If you go on Jupiter Grades, you'll notice that I've already graded and entered those grades in there for you as well. Some of you guys have already went ahead and finished up all of your work for the 2 weeks, and that's great. I still hope that you guys will follow along with the notes and the reading and the discussions that we have over the next couple weeks as well. Do remember that on last Friday, I assigned section 23.3 review. I haven't received that from anyone yet. I assume that you guys maybe just forgot it because it wasn't on the packet. But please remember to send that in with your next time, or with the work that you send in next time. Now that we have that out of the way, let's go ahead and get started. Yesterday, like I said, we talked a little bit about William Howard Taft. In 1912 election, Woodrow Wilson wins that election against Teddy Roosevelt and William Howard Taft, and becomes only the second president since the Civil War to become president and be a Democratic nominee. He's also the first president since John Adams to actually make personal appearances in front of Congress. Today we call those the State of the Union. Remember, for about 150 years, this wasn't done in the United States. The executive branch, or the president, didn't really talk to Congress much, especially in a formal setting. Woodrow Wilson is one of the first presidents that does that. He wants the Congress to change the tariffs, most specifically the tiding tariff. A tariff, of course, is a tax on imported goods, and what he wants to do is he wants to lower the tariffs on any kind of raw materials in the United States. And so he makes a plea to Congress by actually going in front of them and asking them to pass this tariff. The tariff is included under what's called the Underwood Act, or the Underwood-Simmons Bill, and it basically lowers import tariffs on many raw materials. Also under the Underwood-Simmons Bill, we have the passage of the 16th Amendment. Now, the 16th Amendment allows for something very interesting in American political history. It allows for senators to be elected directly by voters. Up until this point, party caucuses would essentially choose who the senators would be from a group of guys that were running, and so the party leaders would actually decide who the senators would be. Because of the 16th Amendment, you or me or your parents actually vote for who's going to be the senator representing each one of the states. It is also under Woodrow Wilson's administration that we have the creation of the Federal Reserve under the Federal Reserve Act, which is passed in 1913. Essentially what the Federal Reserve does is it prints the paper money for the United States. It divides up the United States into 12 districts, and each district has its own Federal Reserve Bank. And these Federal Reserve banks are the ones that print money and give that money to smaller banks so they can lend it to you, to me, to regular citizens, but also businesses as well. And this is how the government controls the amount of loans that banks give out to citizens. It's through the Federal Reserve, or the Fed as it's called. The Federal Trade Commission, on the other hand, is a little bit different. What they do is they investigate interstate commerce trade, and they work against unfair trading practices between states or between companies across state lines. In the last chapter, or when we were talking about Teddy Roosevelt, we talked a little bit about him being a trust buster, breaking up monopolies and trusts. Because of the Sherman Antitrust Act, he's able to pass some of this legislation which allows him to break up trusts and monopolies. But as a result, we still have something called interlocking directorates and holding companies. An interlocking directorate is a company that's basically headed by a CEO who's actually a CEO of another company. It could be a company that is competing with your company, or it could be one that is a subsidiary of your company. Either way, this goes against competition, against capitalism, and so this is why this has to be broken up, because these companies tend to become monopolies because of this. Also, we have holding companies. Holding companies are large corporations who hold stocks in smaller corporations. Again, they don't have to be competing corporations. They could be making the same stuff. It's just a way for larger corporations to swallow up smaller companies. Again, this is another form of monopoly or trust, and so this is anti-American, anti-capitalist, and so we have the passage of the Clayton Antitrust Act, which is just an expansion of the Sherman Antitrust Act. During the presidency of Woodrow Wilson, of course, we have World War I, but domestically we also have a couple other problems. And when I say domestically, I don't mean just in the United States, but also in our own hemisphere, in Latin American countries. On the island of Hispaniola, the country of Haiti and the Dominican Republic in 1914, 15, and 16 all have revolutions. They try to overthrow their government. And this instability, while it doesn't affect the United States directly, it does affect something that we own in the Caribbean, which is the Panama Canal. And so any kind of instability around the Panama Canal, we're kind of looking to put down. And so the United States ends up sending Marines to the island of Hispaniola, or to the country of Haiti, in 1914 and 15, and basically lends the Haitian government some money to kind of stabilize their government. We do the same thing for the Dominican Republic. And the reason that we do this is because stability kind of brings stability to the Panama Canal, which gives us the ability to not have to sleep with one eye open. In 1917, the United States also purchases islands in the Caribbean to kind of build military bases that will be able to protect the Panama Canal. We purchased what's called the Dutch West Indies, not to be confused with the Dutch East Indies, which is the country of Indonesia today. The Dutch West Indies are the U.S. Virgin Islands that we know of today in the Caribbean. We purchased that for $25 million from the Holland government. We also close economic ties with the other major South American economic powers. They're called the ABC powers. They're the largest economies and the most stable economies in South America. We're going to be talking about Argentina, Brazil, and Chile. That's why they're called the ABC powers. And during the Wilson administration, we have the passing of several amendments. The most notably, the 16th Amendment, which we just talked about, which taxes personal incomes. The 17th Amendment, which I just mentioned, allows for direct election of senators. The 19th Amendment, which of course gives women suffrage. Now notice we skipped over the 18th Amendment. We've talked about it before. Of course, it's prohibition. And the 21st Amendment, which repeals prohibition. Also during this time, the Mexican government is quite unstable. They have a series of dictators, and some of their violence in the country is actually spilling over into the American Southwest, most notably Texas, Arizona, and New Mexico. One of the men that comes over across the border and actually ends up killing 18 Americans is a guy by the name of Pancho Villa. And General John J. Pershing, also known as Blackjack, who we'll talk about when we talk about World War I, he'll become the commander of the American Expeditionary Force, the men that are sent over to fight in Europe. John J. Pershing is the man that is sent into the American Southwest in New Mexico and Mexico to chase and catch Pancho Villa. He eventually does escape, and we don't capture him, and then we kind of turn our focus towards World War I after that. This is pretty much all the notes that you would have had for Section 5 and Section 6. Make sure that you've done the reading from page 376 all the way to page 381. Excuse me. These two sections will prepare you for a quiz that some of you guys have already taken. If you have taken it, I've already graded for you. But for those of you who haven't, these are going to be your quiz terms over here on the left. Of course, we've talked about some of these already. The Federal Reserve Act, the printing of the money and the dividing up of the country into 12 banking districts. John J. Pershing, of course, we just talked about him being the man who chased after Pancho Villa after he had murdered some Americans in the American Southwest. The 16th, the 17th, and the 19th Amendment. Of course, initiative and recall has to do with the direct election of senators. The Underwood-Simmons bill, as we talked about it in the beginning, and Thomas Woodrow Wilson, the last of the progressive presidents. I hope you guys have been reading and taking down any of the notes. If you haven't taken down these notes, go ahead and pause the video now. This would be a good time to jot them down. Once you have all of that, make sure that you're prepared for the quiz. And that's pretty much all that I have for you all today. Like I said before, each day I'll be posting a lesson up just like this. And so hopefully these have been helpful for you. If anybody ever has any questions or want to get a hold of me or don't know how to figure something out, please just email me. My email is attached to Jupiter Grades. It's my last name, KIKIC, my first name, Alden, at gmail.com. So kikic.alden@gmail.com. Just send me a message or an email saying you want to meet with me, and I can set up a video conference, FaceTime, whatever, so we can discuss any kind of problems that you may have. Please don't hold out until we come back or feel like you're nervous or anything like that. If you have something to ask me, please go ahead and ask me. There won't be any homework tonight. Just prepare for your quiz. And then tomorrow, whenever you're ready, set some time aside and go ahead and work on that quiz number 28 or 27. And once you have finished that, go ahead and give that to your parents so they can bring it in for us here at school, and I can grade it for you and record it into the Jupiter Grades. I hope you guys enjoyed this lesson. I hope y'all are staying safe and healthy, and I hope y'all have a great day. Thanks.